Hello all, welcome back to Thrill of Drive. Today's episode, we're going over an old treasure of mine, a little beast, I'd like to say. This baby, you might not have heard of her before. It's the 1995 Honda Accord. Why don't we take a look at it?
Tell me what you want, baby, honey, and tell me what you want. I can get it for you, baby, if you tell me what you want. I can go and show you what you want. I'll be funny, I'll be fun, I'll be flirty, I'll be shy. I'll go sorry, get you high.
There's much that can be said about this car. It's about 25 years old now, so it's getting up there in age. But you know what? This car is still very handy. It's got 210,000 miles on it, and it's holding strong. So, why don't we look at the basic features of this car? Well, for one, it's 4 doors. This sucker took families everywhere back in the mid-90s. Not to mention that there's also a wagon feature for this car, which is particularly nice. If you're going to get this car, take a look at the wagon one, and take a look at the EX. Mine, unfortunately, is only the LX model, the mid-tier. Honda sold this in 3 tiers, the DX being the very basic, standard one, the LX having a bit more luxury features such as roll-down windows, automatic, along with adjustable mirrors with a nice little switch, and various other little trinkets and features that we'll look at once we get inside. So, why don't we take a deeper look at some of the various things on the exterior, and then in the interior, and then under the hood of this car. Let's go check it out. So this is the rear. It's a nice part of the car, I gotta say. Much of this car is pretty nice, and what I like a lot about this car is the simple design. It's got this nice little plastic body kit below it. It's come stock, don't worry. I did not rice this car that much. Nah, I didn't rice it at all. But there's a few little things you can see back here. For one, you got these nice headlights. The headlights came standard like this in much of the Honda vehicles at the time, but this actually is important because it signifies that it's the old standard headlight, because the refresh for this generation of the Accord ended up getting an extended headlight that goes a little bit more inward right here. The only issue with my Accord is, well, for one, right now, the logo is stripped off of my brother, but he left the trim level.
Bruh.
So, you don't see that it's an Accord, but you see that it's the mid-lock level if you're in the know. It's in rough condition, but overall, this section of the car is very nice. And I like the character that this car has. There's much to it that's really good, and you don't really see cars that look quite like this anymore. So, I mean, living where I am, this car is nowhere to be found. But you'll find this if you go around LA and a lot of the areas with a little bit lower income, because people there still keep their old cars and they know how to treat their Hondas really well. These cars will last you quite a bit if you know what you're doing. So we'll go ahead and delve right in. As you can see, I've got little seat covers on these guys, but these seats are actually pretty nice. They're a little in the rougher condition, a little flattened, but they've held up pretty well despite all this time of wear and tear of 200,000 miles through me, my brother, etc. We'll go ahead and pop the trunk. As you can see, it's got a nice classic radio antenna. Mine likes to kind of dip to this level. Some of these ended up being automatic. For example, my dad's Hyundai Sonata would retract when you turn the car off, and it would turn up when you turn the car on. It was a pretty interesting feature, but of course, them being motorized is not very great. Now, as you can see, there's plenty of trunk space in here. It's very spacious. This car knows how to get a lot out of its space, and that's why a lot of Americans really like it. I mean, as you can see, I've got some stuff in here. I got some old struts from the previous car. I've got a nice set of blankets here. And of course, you've got this little thing right here, where if you turn this little knob, you'll get into the electrical. So actually, changing your lights is very simple in this car. You don't have to worry too much about it. Back there is the least stock thing in this car, and that is the sound system. It's a nice amplifier. I highly recommend getting an amplifier in any car that you're in, but even in an economy car like this, it turns a basic car into something that's really fun to drive, take people around in. It's really simple. It's really simple. you could do a little bit better at hiding the wiring, but there's not really a need because there's so much trunk space back here that you won't have that many problems with it. Of course, there's the flap underneath that leads to the spare tire. I've used that just earlier this year, in fact. And overall, the trunk is very usable. If you're using this as a grocery getter, it is the go-to. I highly recommend this. We'll go ahead and quickly check the back seat, and then I'll show you in a little bit more about this. But as you can see here, we've got a little release lock. I'm not gonna end up showing it right now, but if you really need more space, you can easily get it. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about what's going on back here. What ends up being one of the nicest features of the Honda Accord is that even for a big guy like me, I'm 6'4", call me ladies, you get quite a lot of space back here. I mean, I'll hop in. This seat right now is at about where I'd have it when driving in a comfortable space. And as you can see, it's not perfect. My knees are touching this. But if somebody short is driving, or if the driver decides to accommodate for his passengers, I get plenty of legroom back here. That's miraculous. It's absolutely a miracle. And I can switch over here and it's still nice and good. You've got this nice little armrest. There's no cup holders back here. There is a little ashtray type thing in here, but that's about it. As for the back seats, you don't get a little flap on this side, but you do get it right here. So if you need, for example, what I have are these windshield covers. If you end up needing something to block off the tears of the sun, you can put them right here. Nice and simple. Other than that, it's a very simple back seat. It's cloth. You can get these in leather, but typically you'll find these in cloth interiors. To get a leather interior, you have to get the EX model, which is the higher trim. And you might also get it in the LX model if you live in Canada. It's a little weird quirk. Canadians often get better interiors in their cars, just because they live in the cold all the time. And that's it for the backs. Another quick quirk I want to point out is that you get these little courtesy lights here, as you can see. You don't normally get these in all these types of age of cars, but you do get them in this car. Not even the new car that I bought, the Honda Prelude, has this. So even other Hondas, which are higher cost cars to buy at that time and to find nowadays, you don't get these courtesy lights, but these come standard in the LX trim. So now let's take a look at the interior on the front side. Let's hop in. So here we are on the interior. Let's take a look at this dash. It's the first thing you should see when you come into these cars. Now, this wheel is a nice standard Honda steering wheel. It's got these funny little buttons, which came a lot on Honda's cars and other cars in the period in the 90s. The reason why is because they were trying to figure out what to do with this airbag. As you can see, if I push them center, no horn. If I push this, I'm trying to keep it light. But yeah, you get that funny little horn sound. There's our dash. It's iconic of this period of vehicle. You got your nice temperature gauge, your battery and oil gauges, little extra gauge here. You've got this little guy here, which may seem unimposing at first, but this activates the maintenance required thing right here, which is basically useless other than the fact that it tells you you need to change your oil. Fun little fact there. You've got other things here. This little dial adjusts the brightness of your dash lights during night. You can even push it in if you don't want to change it. So if I want to change it, I can do this, but if I want to leave it, I will do that. Another thing that you don't get in the LX trim that I failed to mention earlier is you see this little button here. You got cruise control, very nice, very useful, but then you got this thing. It doesn't have a function right now. But if you had a moonroof, which this car does not have, this would be your moonroof switch for on and off. As for everything else in this car, you've got this little dash gauge here. As you can see, one of these little dials is a little different because these have a little pattern of braking sometimes. So this is what the stock one looks like. This is what a standard one looks like. And then of course you got the AC. The AC on this car after all these years, still manages to work just fine. You got your hazards, very nice. And then this little radio. This is not the stock radio, in case you couldn't tell. It is 100% added on. But it's great. And it matches basically all the other functions of the original radio. It has your basic dial. It has your basic functions of aux. It has this charge function, which doesn't really function in this car. You've got the CD player. You've got everything going on in here. You got this little clock as well, which if you push in, regardless if it's day or night, it'll show the flash. You can also pull this down and you can see hour, minute, reset, a classic clock function. Automatic gauge, that tells you what gear you're in. This does not come in the manual transmission models. The manual transmission model is much cleaner, will not show up. There's a few other things up here, including the brake light, brights, seatbelt light, which on this model at least, or if my brother had tinkered with it, does not show up. But if you have the higher trim, I imagine the seatbelt activator switch still works. Check engine light, still not on this car, nice and good. You've got other things right here, such as a cruise control gauge, which will activate and turn green when you're cruising. I like cruise control when I need a brake on my foot, but it's kind of difficult to use in that sense because you're always pushing accelerate, decelerate, accelerate, slow down, and then you hit the brake, and then you have to reactivate cruise control from this button here and all that. It's a bit of a drag. One thing that you don't get in a lot of cars of this kind of level is you don't get locks like this on the door where you can lock every single door. My friend has a Mazda 6, which we will see soon, our boy Shadow do. You have to lock all the doors manually, but this car is awesome. It has auto locks all around. You get this nice little gauge here, including this little mirror button, and it does work, but only the right one. The left one is kind of weird. I don't know if this was a budget thing with the LX trim, but you have to adjust it manually like this, which isn't so bad, but it's such a weird little design to save money. I have a little coffee cup in here, but now we got this cup holder. It's pretty basic. Push it in, and if you just want to keep your dash nice and clean, it's like that, but if you want the functionality, you got two cups in there. Pretty neat, pretty neat. Got your e-brake right here. Works nice and great. I always use it. It's really good. As you can see, it's got a little wear on it, but that's fine. You got this little thing down here. Plenty of space in here. There's also a little lap in case you want to pull it down. Funny little story real quick. I've got this little box right here. This is for the turn signal gauge because one time I had a wheel cover on this. The wheel cover wore out and there was a little bit of string hanging from it. It went around my freaking windshield wiper gauge right here and then broke it apart. So I've got this piece to prove it. So yeah, it looks slightly different here, but they're basically the same. I don't know if you can see that. But yeah, that's pretty much the most handy. Well, with that being said, let's just take it for a quick spin before my camera's battery runs out. Also, before I run out of space on the freaking camera. Let's go. Why don't we? All right. Why don't we take it for a spin? I'm gonna go over the basic little things on what it's like to drive this car. Ready? Bam. We'll get the air going. Air works great still. That's what's really refreshing about this car. It, despite all these years, is still running fine. And I think that's just a testament to these Hondas and Toyotas and Japanese engineering. These cars know what they're doing. They know how to handle very well and keep things simple. And you know what? This car has a lot of cool things to it. We'll go ahead and get a look at it once we're out on the road a little bit more. Well, my neighborhood road, that is. I'm not gonna go too hard right now. I'm gonna keep it nice and simple for you guys. But I'm gonna show you I'm gonna go over the basic driving stuff. So, this car rides really smooth. It's meant to be an economy car, first and foremost. I'm gonna shift down into these low gears actually now, so we can get a little spin of them. I'm in the first gear, and this economy car, as I was saying, just really nice, simple ride. You don't have to worry too much about going fast. And this is the LX trim, so this model gets about 135 horsepower. Not very much. The torque, I don't even know what the torque is. It's not much. Let's just say that. But when you shift, you do feel a little bit of a a little bit of things going on. I couldn't tell you if that's just because the transmission is questionable or if it's because there actually is a secret amount of torque that I don't know about. Either way, it's nothing spectacular, but it's a really fun ride. Well, it's a really smooth, simple ride. And there's something nice about this type of car. You don't have to worry too much about it. It's very straightforward. It's very smooth, and it's got those 4 speeds in your automatic. Now, if you get a manual transmission, this car is going to be lovely. This car was built for the manual transmission, particularly the EX model, which has about 145 to 150 horsepower. If you want to get this car, again, get the EX model, because for one, they shouldn't be that expensive. For another, they just have better features all around. And being in a manual Honda with a 5-speed, it's the way it's meant to be. It feels good. It's so much better. Honda at this time was making nice, solid transmissions. They knew what they were doing, but this automatic is actually not that bad. I've heard that the automatic for the next generation, the 6th generation Honda Accords, were a little bit more infamous for having reliability issues once you got up there in age and you have to replace the transmission. Mine's held out. I don't think we've replaced the transmission once on this car. And you know what? You could probably get easily another 50,000 miles, if not 100,000, just doing your basic maintenance on this type of car. And other than that, the basic things that you should look at with this kind of car is, particularly the EX model, is look for that VTEC version, because the EX will have VTEC, and that will turn this car into a standard city grocery getter into something that has a little bit of fun under there with the when you want to get a little bit aggressive. It's not much, it's not crazy, but it's fun, it's enjoyable, and you can really enjoy this car if you just get that simple upgrade. I think the 0 to 60 time in this is like 10 to 11 seconds, so you're not going fast. Not at all. But it is fun to drive, and I think this car is the ultimate testament of how slow cars can be just so fun to drive fast. They're not fast cars, but they are fun. And I think that comes down to the feel of this engine. And the feel of this engine is very straightforward and responsive. It's not as quiet as maybe some of the newer cars that are coming out these days. You hear this engine, and it's not this super powered engine that is meant to be heard because Corvette owners wanted to make it that way. It is just an older engine that goes a little bit louder. And you know what? There's something simple about that. There's something simple about the joys of a good and fun engine. More importantly, a reliable one. There's a few little things you should look out with this kind of car. For one, I recommend, again, that manual transmission, but I also recommend making sure that everything just feels right on the inside, because there's a lot of these cars going around that just don't have great interiors anymore. And that's one thing I'm a little bit proud of my car, is that despite all the roughness on the outside, the interior, especially in the back seat, held pretty well. And you could fit a family in this. You could really just enjoy your time with this car and get a ton of mileage out of it. Other than that, we'll take one final look at the powertrain now and that engine, talk about it a bit, and we'll wrap this thing up. Oh, wait, we can't close it yet. We'll give it a lift. We'll close it. So, this car's pretty fun. Why don't we go ahead and get a lift out? Let's take a look under that hood. Into the air. And there she is. Let's get up close. So there she is. This little engine right here is the Honda F-Series. That's a specific type. It is the F22 B2, and I can't read the rest of the engine code because there's a little bit of oil in the way. Whew. But yeah, let's take a look at this. As you can see, it is a 16-valve Honda engine. It's a little warm right now. It just came out. Why don't we look at the Nope, I'm just kidding. We're not going to do that. We're not going to look at the coolant. That would be very silly. It's a little dirty around here, but as you can see, you've got your various little things here. Brake fluid, power steering fluid, washer fluid that does not work, alternator. We've got some new belts on this thing. This thing has a new timing belt, by the way, which
is going to really serve this car well, because that is the biggest service on this type of car, the timing belt. There's all sorts of things to look at here. As you can see, there's other things including this nice little heat shield over the exhaust system. Got the cruise control actuator, and you've even got this little strut thing. There's no hand adjustment though. That is an old strut. Battery, air intake, everything's here. But let's talk about why I like this engine. The reason why I really like this engine is because this engine ended up becoming one of Honda's signatures, not only through the 90s becoming super notoriously reliable, but later on, this engine ended up becoming the predecessor to one car we'll be talking about soon with the engine, the H series. This block is a little bit bigger, and it has this distinctive cylinder head, as you can see, with a valve cover, and it's very square. Honda makes these nice square engines. There's even a V6 Accord, which I should mention. It comes in the LX edition, so if you do want one of these kind of cars, for whatever reason in the LX, get the V6 one, because it's going to have a lot more torque, and it's going to feel a little bit more luxurious, even though the gas mileage is a little bit less. I also want to mention again the wagon version, because the wagon version is so nice. It is one of the optimal ways of enjoying this car even further. As for maintenance on this car, it's very simple. I mean, you've got your nice oil dipstick right there. You've got your transmission fluid dipstick down hiding in there. And there's just not that much you really need to focus on with it. This thing's just super reliable. And you can't go wrong with a lot of what Honda does. Again, this car is lovely. It was my brother's car before me, and he used it to get through high school. He had a truck. He ended up getting in a crash with it, so he didn't want to drive it. It was on its way out. It was a nice old Ford Ranger. This car was the one to go with from there. And you know what? It's a great choice. It lasted him a while in his drives. It's got about 16 gallons of gas in its fuel tank in the back. And you know what? If you need the daily commuter, the daily driver, if you need a car, you don't really care about the bells and whistles too much, you can't go wrong with this. And you know what? The bells and whistles it does have are worth everything, because this engine, reliable, long mileage, great at doing what it does. The interior, fragile, it can be fragile, you gotta be careful with that, but you know what it does? It does the job. It has enough comfort, it has enough in the front seat to where everything's analog. That's what I love about this car. It's analog, it's simple, it's straightforward, and it does the job. You don't need these fancy bells and whistles sometimes. Maybe you're like me, where you just want a car that does what you need and provides the nice things that you want. Options for upgrading the sound system, all that sort of stuff. It's really great. So yes, if you're gonna get a Honda, the F series is great, the H series is great, everyone talks about the K series, even the J series is really good on those Acuras. This one is underrated in my opinion, because it may not be this super tuner engine, it may be a little bit bulkier, but you know what it is? Reliable and simple, and that's all you need.
So that's the Honda Accord. It's a simple vehicle, it does its job, it's got 4 doors. It's a nice little vehicle. I'm sorry to really have to let it go. It's such a nice car. It does everything you would want it to do, and I've had it for years. It takes me back to high school when I drove this car and fitting all my friends in it. And you know what? This is one of the best first cars out there. If there's a first car to own, it's this car. And the reason why is because it's simple, manageable, 4 doors, again. Has options too. You can get different trim levels, and if you get the highest trim level or you get the manual transmission, this car will not only be simple, controllable, maintainable, reliable, but it'll also be a little bit fun and straightforward. It'll feel good to drive. It does feel good to drive. I love this car. If I had to give it a rating, I don't have a second friend with me to give me his opinion, but I'd give this car a solid 8 out of 10, particularly for its era, for its reliability, and for its ability to hold its weight in gold. I mean, it doesn't really maintain its value, but it does maintain its reliability, drivability, and simplicity. And And you know what? That's simple. It's a simple little car. If you get the wagon version, that shoots it up even more because that has the added practicality, the added style, in my opinion. It can be a little weird. The older wagons, in my particular opinion, are a little bit better. But the EX version and the wagon version are the way to go. Even the V6 version, if you're not as concerned on fuel economy, it will feel so much better and it will still have that reliability. I'm not sure, I can't give a 100% accuracy to how reliable the V6 is, but from what I've heard, it's just as good as, say, this one. And V6s in these standard economy cars are really fun. So, that's the review. Thank you for watching Thrill Drive. We'll be coming back at you soon with a little bit more content. It's not as often as it should be, but hey, we've got some big things coming up with the next cars that we've got. I hope you stay tuned for the rise of manual and for the thrill of drive.